At a presidential debate over the weekend, ABC's George Stephanopoulos presses Mitt Romney on contraception.
Or is that trumped by a constitutional right to privacy?
George, this is an unusual topic that you're raising. The states have a right to ban contraception.
I showed that and other clips of the debate to a conversation analyst in the Department of Communication at the University of New Hampshire, who agreed to review the speech patterns of the candidates for clues on how they might influence voters.
We're having issues that relate to same-sex marriage.
Some people tend to see and hear Romney as presidential, but I think you could look at many of his presidential qualities. What is it, if we tried to break that down, say, you could read those same variables or traits as robotic. Romney does have a lower intonation or pitch, so we perceive his voice as lower and deeper, certainly than Ron Paul.
She says most Americans are used to American presidents not coming off as completely straightforward.
So I think a question that went through my mind is, does Mitt Romney come off as presidential because he actually is evasive? He actually does resist answering.
There's a good deal of it that's perspective, she says. But one situation of a rehearsed and not so spontaneous Mitt Romney exchange comes from the recent campaign trail when Romney encounters a gay veteran in a New Hampshire diner.
And you just don't support equality in terms of same-sex marriage.
I believe that marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman.
Meaning?
And the Defense of Marriage Act.
By contrast, she says Ron Paul is incredibly unscripted and off the cuff with a few quirks.
Deferments aren't. They have no right to send our kids off to war and not...
Not only does he have a slightly, I guess, higher pitch or higher intonation, when he speaks a little faster, and he does a lot of what we call hitches and perturbations. So that, it's basically when it looks like or sounds like you're repairing your own talk as you're in the middle of saying it. So if I were to start talking and then I don't know, I just started cutting off my words in the middle of saying it, and then I abandon one thought, and then I...
Would you use that phrase again?
Yeah, I think people who...
That seems like I'm less rehearsed, less prepared, and more in the moment. And I think we interpret that as, oh, that's genuine. Now, it might not seem as presidential, because we expect our presidents to be thoroughly scripted, low in tone. Mitt Romney might come off as more presidential in some ways, but he also comes off as less spontaneous, less in the moment, and therefore possibly less trustworthy by some people. I always tell my students this, remember that if Ron Paul is coming off as honest, from the gut, straightforward, just a straight shooter, that's also an accomplishment, that he's actually actively doing that and cultivating that. He makes it seem like it's very spontaneous, and therefore he's more off the cuff and honest.
In that same exchange, she says there's a key point about Newt Gingrich's delivery.
And I personally resent the kind of comments and aspersions.
The way that Newt Gingrich speaks is a tone of dismissiveness and condescension. I don't, again, know if people would make a vote based on that. I think, though, in that moment, Gingrich seems defensive as opposed to, which some people do interpret as a little bit weaker or whinier, rather than commanding and, you know.
In Manchester, New Hampshire, I'm Andy Jordan for the Wall Street Journal.